How could you not exist in diet culture and wonder, should you be doing those at-home food sensitivity tests, or do you need to be doing a food sensitivity test? Literally everywhere we look, almost all the time, we are told that whatever we're experiencing when it comes to our body, any kind of discomfort, our digestion, acne, body size, the list goes on, we're told that it's because of some kind of food or food group. And then on the other side of that, we're told, well, it's probably because of a food, so you should just do this food sensitivity test and you can figure out what's going on for you. If this is you, if you're thinking or if you've gotten a food sensitivity test in the past, this video is for you, because I'm going to talk about why I do not recommend that you do at-home food sensitivity tests. I'm going to tell you the food sensitivity tests that I also don't recommend getting from clinicians. And I'm going to offer some suggestions and guidelines around if you have any doubts or wonderings about if foods are a good fit for you. What do you do with that information? Where do you go? How do you find somebody that you trust? And if you've already tried doing a at-home food sensitivity test in the past and eliminated foods and felt some kind of relief, this video is also for you, because oftentimes when we take those tests and have to eliminate a bunch of foods and food groups, we're left with not having too many options, or we're left feeling a lot of fear around food. I can tell you a lot of people that I have worked with over time feel a ton of fear around food when they get those tests done. So if you're wondering, are they valid? Should I include those foods? What happens if I did feel better when I eliminated those foods from the food sensitivity test? Definitely stay tuned for this. And before we get into the juicy content about food sensitivity tests, I am Catherine Metzelar. I'm a registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and I help people to create peace with food and their bodies so that it can free up headspace and they can experience more presence, freedom, and joy in their life. And I create videos for you so that you can use this information to help you heal your relationship with food and your body. You definitely want to take a listen to this. So let's start with the science of food sensitivity tests. Now, if you are not a science person, don't worry. I'm not going to get too much in details, but I think that having a foundation to start so that you and I are on the same page can be helpful. Let's start with at-home food sensitivity tests, as well as what I've seen some naturopathic physicians and also nutritionists and other clinicians out there will offer as a food sensitivity test. Those tests are called IGG tests. They test for something called IgG antibodies. What people are told when we get these results back is that they have a sensitivity to all the foods on the list, and therefore they should exclude them. A lot of times, and if you experience this, you know, you will take the IgG test, whether it's at home or in an office with a clinician, and it's this really long laundry list of all kinds of foods. And a lot of times there's fear that comes up immediately that you can't have any of those foods, that all of those foods are causing harm. And oftentimes they're foods that people are eating often, that they enjoy, and they're left feeling like, well, if I have to eliminate all of these foods, what am I going to eat now? Here's the part that I need you to know. And this is that IgG antibodies are not testing for sensitivities. It is testing for what you are desensitized to, which means that you are seeing on that list all the foods that you are okay with, that your body is like, we have been exposed to these, we're good with them, we don't have an allergy or a sensitivity. And this is really unfortunate, and by that I mean that a lot of people are told that IgG tests are an indication of the foods that you have a sensitivity or an allergy to, which leads to, by the way, all kinds of disordered eating, for people because they end up eliminating whole foods and food groups because of this. The IGG testing is not substantiated by any medical institution or any large-scale allergy institution because we know that what we're seeing is that you're okay with those foods and food groups, not that you have a sensitivity and you should cut them out. If you have done this test before and this is the first time that you're hearing this information, it is okay to have doubts, it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling as it comes up. There's a lot to process, and sometimes this can lead to people being stuck in disordered eating for a really long time because of these food sensitivity tests. Now, I didn't even mention the genetic food sensitivity tests, and those are also not substantiated by the research. There's some understanding of correlation potentially to things, but remember, correlation doesn't equal causation, and there isn't enough substantiated scientific evidence to support the use of genetic testing around foods and food sensitivities. So now, seeing that the IgG tests are a no for testing food sensitivities and allergies, what do you do then? If you suspect that maybe a food isn't sitting right or feeling right, or you feel awful after you eat it, one of the recommendations that I have for you as a first step is to make an appointment with a doctor. Ideally, you'd be making an appointment with an allergist, and they would be able to do a variety of tests, a couple of which are really important to see if you have specific kinds of allergies, which are IgE tests and IgA tests. Those are both two kinds of antibodies that indicate that you have an allergy to a food and that your body is like, no, we do not want those foods. So that is a really, really good place to start. And if you go to any clinician that is suggesting that you do a certain test, in particular the IgG test, or if it's genetic testing, please get a second opinion if you can. I know that you probably have a really good relationship with your clinician or want to really trust them, and who am I to say that you shouldn't? But just be mindful that these tests can cause a lot of harm, and if you're not in the hands of a trained clinician, ideally an allergist, you're not necessarily going to get the most accurate information. So I want us to be really thoughtful, and I want you to be thoughtful about this as best as possible and be as educated as possible, because how are we supposed to know all of this information when we're going in to see a clinician because there's something that's not quite right about what's going on in our digestion or in our body? So now that you know the science and why I don't recommend food sensitivity tests, as well as some of the first steps you can take in order to get a sense, to get some answers around foods, what then comes next? If you are having digestive discomfort, if you're having other things related to body ailments, there's a few things that I want you to consider that may actually surprise you. So definitely stick around to the end, because I'm going to talk about some of the things that might be unrelated to food that could be causing some of the issues that you're having that you've been told are being caused by food. Existing in diet culture means that anytime there is anything wrong with your body, you're told that you should cut out a food or food group. If you're having loose bowels, cut out dairy. If you're having achy joints, cut out gluten. If you are not sleeping well, cut out sugar. And the list goes on and on and on. That is the default, unfortunately, in our culture. The first thing that I want you to consider is the impact of chronically dieting and being stuck in cycles of disordered eating that can impact your digestion and discomfort. This includes bloating, this includes irregular bowel movements, this includes feeling like when you eat food, it just sits there, and other things that people experience from a digestive perspective that can be directly caused not only from the dieting and disordered eating, but also the stress of all of it, which we'll continue to talk about more, but stress has a huge impact on our digestive process. And so that's something to consider. But I want to talk a little bit more about the disordered eating and dieting piece and how that can impact specifically your digestion. When you are dieting and not getting enough food, and by dieting, I'm speaking really generally, this can include certain lifestyle plans or not eating certain foods or restricting the amount of food that you eat. When you are stuck in cycles of dieting and disordered eating, dieting is a form of disordered eating, common things when you are dieting that a lot of people experience and are encouraged to practice are going long periods of time without eating, reducing their overall energy intake or caloric intake, cutting out certain foods or food groups. And what ends up happening is generally, people are not getting enough food, and so their digestive system isn't working consistently. They are usually including a lot more foods that have water content, like fruits and vegetables that fill up space in the stomach, but don't necessarily have a lot of energy density. And it's also not uncommon to ebb and flow between eating smaller amounts of food and larger amounts of food because of the low energy intake and because it leads to a lot of binging experiences because people aren't getting enough of their needs met. This could be from a caloric perspective, but this could also be from a nutrient perspective, for example, in the case of carbohydrates. When we then introduce those foods, when we stop dieting and restricting, it's really hard on our digestive system. It is not used to getting food regularly. If we are undernourished, no matter what size body you're in, if we're undernourished and we're trying to re-nourish our bodies, our digestive system can often have all kinds of problems with digesting food. And so it can take some time when you are healing from disordered eating for digestion to resolve itself. So something to keep in mind is that when you are stuck in cycles of disordered eating, which you might be right now, it is very common as a result of that to have digestive issues because of the disordered eating itself and not because of a food or food group. The second reason is stress. I really want to emphasize the impact of stress on your digestive system. We go to blaming foods immediately, but we have to consider the impact of stress, the stress of disordered eating, the stress that you're experiencing in the world, the stress of any worldly events that are happening, and on. We have to consider the impact that it's having on you and your digestive system. Your body is incredibly wise, and in the context of experiencing stress, it makes sure that it prioritizes the things that will keep you safe, not necessarily the things that you might need in the here and now. And one of those things are digestion. There's all kinds of stress hormones that are released that specifically impact digestion because they're supposed to. If you need to protect yourself or you need to get somewhere safe and your body's like, hey, wait a minute, let me make sure I focus on digestion, that would be really unhelpful. So it can really impact, again, digestion, bloating, gas, discomfort, pain. And so I want you to consider this as well before you cut out a food or a food group, and or definitely don't get the IGG test, but before or even alongside of going to an allergist, to really consider, could what you're experiencing in your body be related to something else? The last thing that you might be experiencing when it comes to certain symptomology, pains and aches and digestive things that are happening when it comes to food is something called the nocebo effect. The nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect, which you likely have heard of if we're told something positive about a food or a medication in research. We measure how much the person experienced the impact of that medication, even though it's just a sugar pill. The same thing we've learned applies to the perception of something having a negative impact on us. If we believe, for example, that gluten is going to impact us from a digestive perspective, if it's bad for our joints, then the likelihood that we are going to experience those things is much higher. Now, please know that there is nuance to this conversation. What I'm not saying is you shouldn't go to an allergist. Definitely go see a doctor if you have any concerns. But what I am saying is our beliefs and perceptions of the foods themselves impact us. They impact us when we eat them. And so a really important part, I believe, if you are having anything going on with your body or any suspect that there's certain foods or food groups that could be impacting you, is really addressing your relationship with food, unpacking any food beliefs that you have, really checking whether or not the things that you've been told about certain foods and food groups, again, using gluten as an example because there's so much information out there, checking to see, is it actually rooted in science, or is the information that you've been provided extrapolated from research to support one argument, and really there's a lot more to it. I think that this can fundamentally change our relationship with food, and two, for a lot of people, it can resolve a lot of stresses and fears and connections to things that they were experiencing that weren't because of the food, but because of their perception of it being negative, and or can reveal, as they're working on their relationship with food, something else that needs to be addressed as it relates to their body, getting physical therapy, figuring out what's going on with their digestive process, and other things that arise that just makes more space for that if we are not blaming food and assuming that we're going to experience something negative from the food itself. Please know with all of this that how you're feeling really matters. Your discomfort matters. I would never dismiss, and I don't want anyone else in your life to dismiss anything that you're experiencing in your body, whether that's digestive discomfort, aches and pains in your body, etc. We are doing this thing where we're both holding and acknowledging and honoring that whatever you're experiencing deserves support, it deserves attention, you deserve some sort of offering around it, while also at the same time holding that we exist in a diet culture where we're told all the time that what we're experiencing in our body is a direct result of the food and food groups that we're eating. And because of that, we might quickly either be recommended and or to do it ourselves to quickly eliminate and cut out foods when it is absolutely not necessary, which leads to lots of disordered eating and fear. And I ideally want to, as best as I can, prevent that from happening for you. So things I want you to take away. 1, IGG tests are a sign that your body is a-okay with those foods. That it's a sign that you've had a lot of exposure to those foods. They are not an allergy test. 2, if you have suspect around certain foods or food groups, please make an appointment if it's possible with an allergist to do some additional testing to figure out if you do indeed have something going on that needs to be addressed. 3 is because you exist in a diet culture, you're told that you should eliminate foods and food groups, and I want you to consider the stress in your life, the impact of disordered eating, as well as the Nacebo Effect. Now, that's not an exhaustive list, but it's a good place to start in thinking about, could what's going on in your environment be impacting what's going on in your body? And or if you eliminated blaming foods, not that this is your fault, but blaming foods, what else could you uncover in the process that might need to be addressed by a medical practitioner or a clinician? Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful. If you liked it, I would be honored if you give it a like below. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you soon.